How to Put the Shovel Down, featuring Amber Hollingsworth. Family members and loved ones who have been impacted by someone's substance use have often tried several different approaches, solutions, and efforts to fix the problem. The efforts and attempts were not short in supply, and yet often family members and loved ones identify feeling frustrated when things haven't changed. Sometimes we have to look at what's in our hands and reflecting on what we thought may have been a solution is only digging us further down into the problem. Amber Hollingsworth joins this episode to talk about how she has spent 20 years helping families navigate the path of addiction and highlights the platform she uses to help educate and provide resources. Her YouTube channel, Put the Shovel Down, offers a catalog of videos for family members and loved ones to help do just that and navigate some of the messy parts of addiction. Our guest on today's episode is Amber Hollingsworth, who has spent the past 20 years helping families navigate the messiest parts of addiction. And through her Hope for Families Recovery Center and her YouTube channel, Put the Shovel Down, she's become a steady guide for over 700,000 followers dealing with the struggle every day. Amber believes families don't have to sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to hit bottom. Her approach is practical and compassionate, centered on early strategic intervention. She provides families with real tools to communicate, set boundaries without ultimatums, and move from conflict and enabling to genuine support. Whether it's about reaching someone in denial, handling functional alcoholism, or knowing when to step back for your own well-being, Amber's insights are drawn straight from decades on the front lines. She also knows how addiction fractures family dynamics and teaches families how to rally together as a team instead of being pitted against each other. Her invisible intervention approach offers an alternative for those burned out by confrontational models, showing how subtle shifts in empathy could promote lasting change. Amber brings warmth, honesty, and actionable guidance. You can learn more about Amber by visiting www.familyrecoveryacademy.online/Amber and visit her YouTube channel, Put the Shovel Down.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
We want to welcome Amber Hollingsworth to Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. Thanks for taking the time to meet and talk today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Excited to be here.
Yeah, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, well, I have been working in this field, working with people who have addictions for more than 20 years now. Now, my journey of getting here is a little different than most. I feel like most people that do the work I do are in recovery themselves usually from some sort of chemical dependency. And I got here quite by accident. I do come from an addicted family, and I really wish I could say that's why and how I got here. But to be completely honest, I didn't even realize that until I was already in the field. As embarrassing as that is to say, when you grow up in it, it just seems normal.
Yeah, I remember I started doing counseling when I was 20. Well, it's now 21 years, but I started when I was 19. So like I always say, like I grew up in the profession of substance use counseling.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think of that way without having some of the other backgrounds that a lot of other clinicians and helping professionals and people have. So yeah, that's interesting to hear. Thanks for sharing that. I want to talk right away about your podcast or your YouTube channel. And I love
Hmm.
the title. It's Put the Shovel Down. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that? Because you are my first guest who that is like their main platform or one of their main platforms for sharing and reaching out to people. So can you talk a little bit about Put the Shovel Down YouTube?
Yeah, sure. Well, initially, when I first started making YouTube videos, I had named it something basic like addiction recovery something. And and I was having trouble getting subscribers. And my sister, who's kind of techie, she said, "Well, people might not want to subscribe because maybe they don't want that, to be obvious on their list or whatever." And she said, "Name it something that like people would maybe get that were in that genre, but other people might not." And that's when I remembered a phrase that when I was the first a counselor, one of the young people used to say all the time, and which was, "You hit your bottom when you put your shovel down." And so that's where that comes from. And our mission is to try to help people before they lose everything, before they burn all their bridges, they lose their partners, their kids, their careers. And so we're all about it. You don't have to hit bottom. You just have to know you're headed that way and put your shovel down.
That's amazing. I'm glad you mentioned that because I did notice that was one of the topics because I've done some talks and some presentations on like what I look at as like the dangers of rock bottom because
Hmm.
sometimes like people are we hear that we're like, well, you got to hit rock bottom, or someone's really not going to change until they hit that bottom. And for family members too, I know I get worried because sometimes family members, when they think someone's hit their bottom, or when that person has said they've hit their rock bottom, they're under the belief now that like, well, there's no way to go now but to get better or to change. And that's that's not something that is a guarantee or a promise. So
Right.
I very much want to talk to you about that concept and
Hmm.
definitely with family members about this idea that like you must hit rock bottom and that's just part of the pathway when to me like that doesn't have to happen.
That doesn't have to happen and can be kind of dangerous, to be honest, because the I think people forget that the most basic definition of addiction is continued to use despite consequences. And so it's in the very definition. Consequences are not going to make someone get better. Now, I do think that people have to get uncomfortable. Like the the pros and the cons have to get out of balance a little bit. But I feel like if when people go too far and they lose too much, the chances of them coming around are less and less. I mean, how many times do we see people who've lost their freedom, lost their children, are living homeless, and they're still using. What happens is you get used to it. As scary as that sounds, like, for a while that is scary and you might want to do everything to avoid it, but once it happens to you, you kind of just get it becomes normalized to you, and then you have absolutely no leverage. And so the idea, especially what you're saying, Andrew, like from a family perspective, they'll think, well, I'm just gonna hurry this along. I'm gonna kick them out. I'm gonna do all these things. I'm gonna have them arrested or whatever, and then that's gonna be their bottom, and they're gonna turn it around. But that's not really the case. Like you said, that's not a guarantee.
Yeah, and I like that, it's got to be uncomfortable. So that to me, a lot of times it becomes what I call like the tale of two cities, where like at the beginning, things were different when it started.
Yeah.
But at some point there becomes like this shift in when I hear people say like, I don't even know why I do it anymore, or I'm
Hmm.
doing it and it's not doing what it used to, or this is what's happening to me and yet I can't stop. Like to me, that's where there's like this big shift in how it used to be. But it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that one city has to burn down or be like
Right.
destroyed. But recognizing when that shift has happened to me has been more of a moment I'd like to sit in and explore with someone
Hmm.
versus like waiting for things to get worse and worse because it doesn't get easier the worse it gets. Like it's
Right. That's
harder.
right.
Like you have less resources, less
Hmm.
support. You have, what kind of energy do you have left or motivation when it's so far down
Right.
that if we're looking at getting out or making a way in recovery, like that's not the easier way. That is going to be much, much more challenging. So I really appreciate that because I hear that a lot, but also I think sometimes family members get stuck in some false hope that that's what
Hmm.
will lead to change because now they
Hmm.
hit rock bottom. And I think sometimes it's glamorized and,
Hmm.
sometimes movies, films, stories, and that's not unfortunately what we see.
Exactly. And it's perpetuated by people it's just something that you hear. And so then we just say it to each other. Even people in recovery will say that to other people and to other family members, and it's misleading for sure. Like what you're saying a lot about family members. One of the ones I see a lot, Andrew, is family members will think after someone overdoses, that's surely going to be their bottom. And I find that overdose is rarely the thing because I'm like, if you were there for it, it was traumatic for you, but they don't even remember it. So, in fact, if it's like, related to opiates and they give them, naloxone or something, they're going to come out and withdraw. So the chances that that's going to be the bottom is very small, actually. And I think families are surprised by that because they think, oh, that's like the ultimate. But we have to remember that the person that's dealing, especially if it's a substance use disorder, is under an anesthesia. So they don't feel the pain and the consequences the same way you might expect. And so the continued, bottoms and suffering, it's not necessarily a thing. I do think there has to be a little bit, like I said, of uncomfortableness, but there also has to be some hope and some idea that maybe it could be better on the other side. And when those two things intersect at the right point, that's when you really have a formula that can work.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump to another topic from your YouTube. I want to
Hmm.
go back to the platform itself because it's
Sure.
such an interesting topic. Is what have you noticed about like when you use that for your platform to um create these videos and talk about a variety of things? Like what have you noticed as far as people engaging with it or reaching out or is there commenting that goes on that you pay attention to? So with that type of platform, like what have you noticed as far as when people are watching it and what they're getting from it? What have you seen or experienced from people watching it?
I feel like about 70% of our audience, I would say, are people with addicted loved ones, and about 25% is people in some stage of addiction, either thinking about getting sober or getting sober, somewhere in the continuum. And then there's also like some professionals and stuff. But usually it's the family members that find us first. And the thing that I hear all the time is that being told that they're not powerless and that they do have influence over the situation and that there are things they can do. It's the first time they've been told that because everyone else is telling them like you're just going to have to like back up and hope they decide they want it for themselves and hope they figure it out. And it's basically like back out of this, cross your fingers. And when this is your partner or this is your child, this is someone you love and care about and your life is tied up with theirs, it's not really acceptable answer. People want more than that. And that's a lot of what we talk about on the channel is what can you do? Because I strongly believe people do have a lot of influence. I've been seeing people for 20 years. People have been bringing me their loved ones for 20 years, and they somehow think that I have some magic words that help. And to be honest, I do. And so that's what I teach you. I'm like, I'm just teaching you all the magic words. Like, there are a lot of things you can do. It's probably just not what you've been doing. And it feels like nothing works, but if you can kind of put your instincts on hold and look at it logically and strategically, you can get through to people.
How do you have you noticed a lot of times like when I work with a loved one of someone who's got a substance use issue, they usually come in and they're wanting something to help them to stop that behavior or to um fix it. It sometimes takes a little bit to get to that point of like, what about for you? Like, what are you doing for you and what are you doing to help yourself or to take care of you during this? I
Hmm.
just had someone who was a new person I'm seeing come in for their uh s- their spouse's substance use and like the first session I had, they were right away they were like, I know I can't control it. I know like if I go around trying to find it or do all
Hmm.
this, but like I know I need help for me. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that's really the first time someone mentions that. That usually happens a little bit later on. How do you in your work how does it that families or loved ones often present when there is the issue going on? Is it that they are looking for what they can do to try to fix or stop it? Do you see that
Mhm.
they're saying, "Hey, I need this for me"? No, like how is it typical for someone to present um, with their struggle or their issue?
Well, it's a good question. Long before I was making videos or content and I was in private practice, people would call me up and they would say, I got your name from someone and I really want, my person to come see you, but they don't think they have a problem and they definitely don't think they need help. What can I do? And when I was in Navy, I would say something like, well, if they won't come in, maybe I can help you. Maybe you should come in. That didn't work very good, to be honest with you, Andrew. And sometimes it was even offensive because sometimes people were like, I'm not the one with the problem. And even worse, if you tell someone, well, just go to Al Anon, they really get offended. So I changed my tactic up. So I'll tell you my secret tactic. Okay. This is what works. As I learned to say, you know what? I'm going to need you to get in here because even if your loved one gets in here, they're not going to tell me the truth. They're not going to tell me what's really going on. And I'm going to need you to get in here and tell me what's really going on and we'll get our head around it together. And let me tell you what, they would screech up in the parking lot on two wheels, running in my office because they're like, that's right. So I'm always about meet people where they're at, even the family member. And if what they want is how to get through this loved one, then that's where I'm gonna meet them. I'm gonna say, all right, this is what we can do because I feel like too often they're told, well, and I get that they do need to work on themselves and get their self back. But when your house is on fire, it's really hard to be told, calm down and go to yoga class or go to Al-Anon meeting or something. You want advice. You want to know what to do and how to do it, when to say it, and all the, what boundaries I should have. You want to know what to do. And so if that's what people want, that's what we give them.
That's good to know too, because family members, like we talk a lot about meeting people where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like the recovery addiction world. I don't think we say it enough when it comes to when we're meeting with, family members, loved ones, other
Mm-hmm.
people. Like, it should be everyone. We reinforce it a lot in that
Mm-hmm.
particular area, but it really is applied to anyone that's coming to seek care, treatment, services, and stuff like that. So, um,
Right. We
I want to,
forget that family members can be in denial. Family members can not be ready for certain things. And we kind of know that about the person that has addiction. So we're kind of like ready for it. But I know for me, I have to remind myself of that with family members because I just assume they're like hitting the ground running. I'm just like, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're like, wait, what? So I have to remind myself of that.
yeah, that's a really good point. There was a video of yours that I definitely wanted to ask about, which was shielding kids from addiction, because this comes up a lot when there are children involved. And I know I've worked with individuals who they've got a newborn on the way, they've got a pretty young child, 1, 2, 3. I know I've worked with ones that have got, teens, teenage,
Hmm.
getting into that. And I also know ones that have uh, adult children, in their 20s, 30s. And
Hmm.
it comes up a lot in when you're working with families or you're working with couples or even, like single parents,
Hmm.
with kids. So this question comes up a lot as to like what's, too much to share, like what is not enough. One thing I always tell families is kids will never know everything, but they probably know more than you think.
Right.
Like, um,
Hmm.
but they also don't know exactly what it is. They have like little bits of information. I say like they know maybe mom or dad are sick, but they don't know that that's from um alcohol. They don't know that that is drug withdrawal, but they notice that like someone is sick or
Something's wrong.
yeah,
Something's off.
they're not around a lot. I know like when
Hmm.
I used to work with some people in what is it, in residential treatment, I know
Hmm.
sometimes the story of like where's dad was like, oh, he's off to work. Like
Hmm.
but really he's in treatment. So I know it comes up a lot when, and I also think the other thing that I always say is like the stories that what we think happened when we were younger, and as we get older, those change. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we get more information, we get older,
Mm-hmm.
we learn a lot. So if I'm a family member, right, and I'm wondering what do we do when it comes to talking with our children about things? Like where do you begin with that? How do you start that conversation? Because that comes up so often in
Mm-hmm.
families.
I think similar to just like what we were talking about with like the loved ones or with the person's addiction, you have to meet each kid where they're at. And each kid needs something different, obviously based on age, but also just based on who they are. Like, for example, a lot of times families want to rush to get a kid into counseling. And I'm not against that, obviously. But sometimes if the kid's issue with it is, oh my God, everything in this house revolves around that. I'm so freaking sick of it. Now I got to go to counseling because of it too. Then you could be causing more harm than good. So you kind of have to look at each. And if you have multiple kids, they're probably all respond to it very differently. One might be scared, one might be angry, one might be oblivious. And so I really think it's case by case basis. And it's a lot more about dealing with that child's feelings around the situation more than it is telling them every detail about the situation. Some kids may want to know more details, some kids don't want to be bothered by it. I said before, I grew up in an addictive family, as in for real. Like my mom died of meth and was doing meth with my older sister. And I didn't even realize that until I was out, like until way later. Like my grandparents were alcoholics. I have no memory of my Mimi without a glass of vodka in her hand. Zero. And I loved her. I still love her. I mean, she is the greatest. But it's like I was kind of like oblivious. I've always just been like, I'm doing. I got my own thing going on. And if anybody would have disrupted me and wanted me to do, I would have been irritated. I've been like, what are you talking about? Like, I got my own life because I've sort of I always say like I raised myself, so I was sort of independent. So that's what I mean when I say you have to look at each child differently and allow them to have their feelings about it. One thing I will say on that is, especially this question comes up a lot, like if your partner or your spouse is addicted and then, you've got a kid involved. One of the things that comes up a lot, because I usually see the person that has the addiction, is when the kid is mad at the person who has addiction or they're upset with them or whatever, that person that has addiction almost always thinks that the partner pitted the kid against them. And that's usually not the case. They think, oh, my kid's just mad at me because my wife told them this and this and that. It's because she's mad at me and she's filling their head with this and that. I rarely find that that's the case. Usually, the other partner is trying to protect the kid from seeing it, and if anything, they're blocking it. Occasionally, you'll get a parent with bad boundaries who's not getting their needs met in their relationship, and they'll sort of go to the kid as a friend and confide everything, and that can be an issue. But um, I would work really hard not to try to make the kid feel any certain way against the other parent because that'll backfire on you.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like I've heard sometimes you can just tell by um the language or how the person is. You get those warning signs that like, okay, this could be a little unhealthy, but I find it really passionate when there's someone who's like I don't want to say something that's going to, you know, shape the way that they view the, this is their mom or this is their dad and like this is like if this can't be about me and them. This has got to be about the family and how that
Yeah.
is. So I know that there's a lot of, which I think is, which is leads to all the questioning of like what to say, what not to say, how to say it, when to say
Yeah.
it. It's very, very challenging for families to, and parents to really know that. So it's great to
Right.
see like a resource of yours that's out there that says some of those
Right. Yeah,
type things.
you don't want to pit the kid against them, but also another thing that I see a lot is and you don't realize it when you're doing it, but sometimes you can be gaslighting to your kids. Like let's say mom's at the table drunk or whatever and being obnoxious and the kid is upset about it and then you might say something like, well, they don't mean it, they love you, and or try to minimize it. And in some ways, that's trying to tell a kid like what you think is happening or what you're seeing isn't really the case. And you're trying to minimize it because you're trying to protect them. But that really can cause problems because then it's sending a signal that to this kid over and over that you can't trust your instinct on this and what you think is wrong. And that can cause problems later in life. So it's a delicate balance.
Kids are
It's hard.
so
Oh yeah.
aware.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, they don't know all, but the awareness they have even at like a super young age until as they get older and older, there's just more ways of them learning things, finding stuff out, and it's incredible. So to me, I think it's not just going to be a whether or not you do, like you are going to, but it's going to be how you do it.
Yep.
It's going to be like when you do it. It's going to be like the age appropriate with where they're at.
Hmm.
But at some point, like you can't not have some, and I always
Yeah.
say too, like it's not going to be you have this one conversation that takes care of it for the rest. I know some people that they're still having conversations with their children or their family about things. Like it's an ongoing thing that's not a one and done. So part of it is just like how does that continue to occur even later on, a year later, 2 years later, when someone might have a question and be like, hey, I remember this from way back and I kind of wanted to ask about it. And a
Hmm.
parent might need to be prepared to have that conversation, even though they didn't even see it coming.
Right. It's multiple conversations. I love what you're saying, right? It's like anything. It's like you don't have a talk about grades one time. You don't have the sex talk one time. This is multiple little conversations as we go and as we're ready for them. And you have to, you have to be ready, like I said, to meet them where they're at. And mostly just let them have their feelings. If they're upset, they're upset. If they're sad, they're sad. If they're maybe trying to rescue their other parent and over enable them and you're trying to make them stop, like you have to like let that kid go through their own process and validate their feeling because whatever they're feeling is valid, right? you know
And I always tell them if they're asking questions, they're definitely thinking about it. They've
oh
been
yeah.
thinking about it. They just now finally are being able to either have the ability to ask or they have
Right.
the need to ask or like they've mustered the courage to ask. But
Right.
when someone is finally like asking or wondering, like that's not the first time that they're like, oh yeah, well, they just had this
Exactly.
one question. It's like they probably had a lot of questions, but now they're
They
at
were
that point.
right.
Versus someone may not have any questions and they might be completely quiet, but part of it is just paying attention to how they're doing, what are they asking, and
Hmm.
being able to meet them where they're at, just like we talked
Right.
about with other people. So
Right.
it's a great
Yeah, young
one.
people may not even be aware because sometimes my clients will say, like, I never use in front of my kids or something. I'm not hurting them. They don't even know or whatever. I don't really say this directly to them, but I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, it doesn't matter if they know that you're doing it or not. The kid may not know what's going on, but they know they can, at bare minimum, sense that there's a problem between the two parents. So they may not know why, but they can definitely feel the tension between the other household members. They can definitely feel the secret keeping, the distance, the upsetness, because, humans are just wired to pick up on other people's emotions. So they may not know why those emotions are happening, but they know they're happening.
I remember I met with a family. I met with a family. It was a mom and dad, and there was two siblings. They were like 13, 14, 15, around there. Like, not super young, but also not pretty old. So, but I remember I met with the family. I met with all of them at once, and they were talking about what was bringing them there, and it was, like some arguing and some disagreements, and that they just felt like this would be needed. I met with the parents then separately, and the
Hmm.
parents then brought up like alcohol use and there being some problem behavior, and it was really both of them that were drinking, that there was some issues. And I asked them, I said, like, what do you think the kids know? Like, what do you think
Hmm.
that they know about anything that's going on here? And they were both like, I don't think they like know anything about like they know that we drink, but I don't think they know anything about concerns with like alcohol. Like I think they just see it as normal family going through some disagreements and arguments, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna meet with the kids separately
Hmm.
next. So I had the two kids that I
Oh,
met
no, I can
with.
only imagine.
Yeah, so right away I was like, so what's I met with all of you. I met with your parents. I said like, uh, where are you at with why you're here to counseling, like
Hmm.
what's going on? And like right away, uh the one kid goes, well, it's gotta be because of the alcohol use and like the problems with alcohol. It's like right away, like they knew. They were so aware of what was going on. And yet the parents were telling me just before that like they think the kids have no clue. But in like
Hmm.
a minute of that difference is where I just always try to talk with parents, especially that kids, it's amazing what they're aware of and what they know. And the more we try to, like your YouTube episode
Hmm.
on that was shield them from it, like almost like it's to that point where like that idea is just completely. And nowadays, the idea of addiction and
Hmm.
alcohol and
Hmm.
drugs like is coming up more and more now in a lot of things that we do. So to me, I always tell parents this too. I either say they're going to learn from you.
Hmm.
They're going to learn from like another adult professional, like a teacher, a therapist. They're going to learn from their peers, or they're going to
Hmm.
learn from like social media and internet. So like if they're not seeing a therapist or they're not getting some of that service, and they're not hearing it from you, we're kind of like limiting now where they're hearing things that at some point there's going to need to be conversations. There's
Hmm.
going to need to be discussions. Maybe I'm not saying today's the day, but the idea of, I guess I don't want family members or like their parents to think like well, I guess I don't say anything. There's nothing for us to talk about. There's going to need to be conversations at some point.
Hmm. Hmm. I absolutely agree. And even coming as a child that grew up in it, sort of knowing it was happening, it's not like I didn't know that substance use was happening. I just didn't I wouldn't have labeled it addiction because it was normal. Like, so it wasn't like I
Hmm.
wasn't aware that was happening. I didn't realize that it was an issue. But even from that oblivious state, I can look back now and see how it affected me. And for me, you wouldn't have known it because I was always like what they would call like the family hero. The one that was like made good
Family
grades,
roles.
doing their, everything they're supposed to do. I always had a job, I always paid for my own stuff. I always did all the things. And that it looks like, wow, she's really thriving or whatever. She's doing great. Like it's not affecting her. But the truth of it is, I think for me, one way it affected me was that there were so many other problems in the family. This was sort of subconscious. I wasn't aware of it. This is me looking back, but I don't think I ever thought there was room for me to have an issue or a problem. So I never brought problems to anyone. I never brought emotional distress. I never brought anything to anyone because I had a sister who was going crazy with addiction. I had parents with issues. And so like I said, it wasn't really a conscious thought, but more of a subconscious thought of like, I have to like take care of myself and I have to like not cause any other problems because the family can't handle it. So it's affecting them no matter what.
Exactly.
Hmm.
There's another one of you have so many topics. I mean, it's just looking at your videos, you have so many different ways, it's great because they can look at it and just kind of find what might stick out to them, might relate to them, what's on their mind. Before I want to talk about another one, where do you get all of the ideas or the inspiration behind just the various topic? I mean, you have such a wide variety. I'm looking at, things from like about medical professionals and
Hmm.
seeking help and looking at specific things, like even like alcohol use in various ways. But, there's just so many different topics of that you have going on here. So where does all of that come from, or where do you get inspiration from just this wide range of things for people to learn about from your YouTube videos.
Mostly just from the work that I do. And what's interesting is, you hear people say like teaching is the best way to learn something. The reason is because when you go to teach something, you have to stop and think about how you know what you know and why you do it the way you do it. Whereas when you're just doing it, you just do it. And you have to really back up and think, why is that? Why do I do it that way? Why do I say it this way? Why do I come out? And it's like, oh, it's because of this. And I don't think I would ever even ask myself those questions if I didn't have to create the content. So our channel is about looking at it from every angle, from the perspective of the person who has it, from the perspective of their loved one, from the perspective of the kids. It's looking at it from multiple angles to really understand it, because it's not just a one person issue, it's a systems issue.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, there's so many different. I'm looking at one now with like even there's one with like sober living house and expenses, and there's the boundaries and pain,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just so many different things that it's be hard for someone to not look through some of these and not like, oh no, 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 no. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's something that is definitely out there. So I want to talk about an issue that I love talking about with people who work with families. And then I also just want to get to some of the other work that you do, because it's not just the YouTube that you have, but
Mm-hmm.
so I want to talk about the word enabling.
Mm-hmm.
It comes up so much
Mm-hmm.
in our profession, this field, when it comes to substance use, addictions, gambling, all
Mm-hmm.
that. I will say that when we gain awareness towards something, what I've noticed is it can lead to the overuse of a word
Oh yeah.
without really realizing what it is, and it gets
Right.
complicated, right? And where I
Mm-hmm.
want to focus on it with families is it's hard enough for family members to acknowledge this struggle, or that they have someone who is struggling with this. What I've seen too much is that no matter what a family member says they've done or tried, and it wasn't successful, I often then hear from other people or from other families, which is really hard, that, well, you're enabling. Like
Oh yeah.
I hear that way too much,
Yeah.
that if you don't say you're going to kick someone out, or you don't say you're going to do this, or you don't like
Then you're
that,
enabled. Yeah, you're
you're called an enabler, which is just really, really, I just can't think of another way to just
right. You're told you're
incorporate
keeping them sick, like you're
shame,
killing
right?
them.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
kind of shame someone into like I always say, like, people are usually doing the best with what they have or what they know, and they are trying to do something, or they have a lot to balance. But I just want to talk to you about that and see where that comes in with you, because I think it's just in my time, and
Mm-hmm.
we've both been in this for a while. It's just something that when I hear family members talk more about what they've tried to do, and if it's not a certain answer or a certain way that another person did it, or another family
Mm-hmm.
member thinks is the right way, that enabler word just gets thrown out so
Yeah.
um haphazardly, without really thinking about like what's your intent,
Mm-hmm.
versus like, is there a better way you could have like maybe talked this through? So I'm with all that, what is your thoughts on what I'm
Yeah.
trying to convey with you here?
I get it. That's the way I feel about the word codependency. Like, oh my God, I just throwing that around like just left and right. Or narcissism. Oh my goodness. Those are the two hot buttons. But I'm glad you asked me about that. That's why I have, 450 enabling videos, because there's a lot to say about it. Most people, when they think about enabling, they think about either giving someone money, letting someone live in their house, or sometimes even just keeping contact, like you're being nice to them, you're enabling them or whatever. Here's my thoughts on it. Are those things enabling, giving someone money or whatever? Sure, to some degree. But and this is just my personal opinion, it's controversial, but the most enabling thing someone can do is play the villain. And here's why. Okay, you give someone $20 who's an addict, they're probably going to go spend it on whatever. Oh, yeah, but they're going to do that in 5 minutes. That $20 is going to be gone. If you play the bad guy role, scream, yell, criticize, control, investigate, do all the things. You are emotionally giving them the currency to continue to use for the next 20 years. Like they will feel resentment and self pity against you, and they'll be talking to the counselor for 20 years about that one thing you said and how you did that. I'm like, if you're going to stop enabling, just stop being the villain because that's what they want from you. Addict needs a villain. And if you're the primary person in the person's life, it's you. They're going to try to put you in that role. And if you refuse to play the villain, they don't get to hide behind anything. They don't get to feel sorry for themselves. They don't get to have resentment. And then they kind of have to face the problem. You give them money or not give them money. I mean, do I suggest you give someone $1,000 a week? Probably not. But honestly, I'm just not that concerned about it. Plenty of super rich people get sober, okay? So like it's not the key factor, right? And what I say to people is, it's like, well, if you give them money and they go use and they die, that's on you. I'm like, no, dude, if that happens, that's because addiction got them, not because your $20 got them. So that's one thought I have about it. And I could talk about that all day. The other thought I have about it is you have to balance your needs and their needs. And sometimes you have a need as a parent or whatever to know your kid has a cell phone to call you if they need it. And you're doing that for you. Okay. Or you're paying someone's electric bill for you because it's Christmas and you don't want to be sitting there worried about your loved one being cold. Okay. So it's about intention. Like you said, Andrew, it's like, what's your thought process behind it? If you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to give them this job in the family business and I'm going to pay them, $8,000 a month. And then they're going to realize they have a lot to lose and they're going to stop using. That's probably not good thinking. But if you're saying, I just can't tolerate the fact that they're cold on the street and I just need to know that they're okay, then you're doing that for you. So it's about separating the intention behind why you're doing it and realizing you have needs too and you need to function too. And sometimes you need peace of mind.
Yeah, I know when I talk with because when I remember I get the questions, do I bail them out? Do I not bail them out?
Hmm.
Do I give them the money? Do I not give them money? Do I kick them
Hmm.
out? Do I let them in?
Hmm.
And I know some people are very direct on it, but to me, I've always thought it's pretty insensitive to give people like do this when I have no there's no better way to say this, but like no skin in the game, right? Like
Hmm.
if I just tell someone, yeah, kick them out, don't let them come
Yeah.
back in.
Easy for me
But
to say, right? Yeah.
I'm not the one then dealing with the phone call when it's late at night and they don't know where they're gonna sleep. So for me, I've always made it a habit to in counseling to sit with someone and walk through what this decision will look like.
Right.
So,
It's so much more
okay,
complicated than people want to make it. People want to make it black and white, but it's not.
well, it's also it's a very misrepresented like
Hmm.
to be or not to be like in a way of like you just do this and that's like the decision when like it's not about like just that part of it because okay, they're in jail. What happens when you're at home and you're thinking about how they are or you get that phone call and they tell you how bad it is. Like
Hmm.
how are you going to be in those moments? Like what are you going to do to take care of yourself? If you do give money and they
Hmm.
end up using it on whatever, it could be drugs, but it could also be gas to get drugs.
Hmm.
It could be on food. Like, what if, then do you get upset? Do you get resentful? Do you see like now you have something over them because of doing that? So to me,
Yeah.
it's never about trying to give an answer, but to me, it's more about like, let's walk through what you're thinking about deciding. Let's consider what's going to happen
Hmm.
if it unfolds this way. Like, how are you going to, what about safety? What about
Hmm.
if you make this decision, what about your spouse? Like, because sometimes they're not on the same page with what to
That's
do.
a really good point. Yeah.
So to me, it just comes up so often, and part of my heartstrings tug because, as parents and loved ones, there's no easy answers of like what to do when this is happening. But part of it is
Mm-mm.
how can you make the best decision with what you have,
Hmm.
considering important things like safety and how this impacts things later on. I just think that what I've seen is it's become so easier for people to just call, and even other family members to call another family
Yeah.
enablers. And part of it is trying to change that and coming together to be supportive because we all know that situation's hard for everyone. That wasn't easy for
Right.
anyone.
Right.
And I also don't want it to sound like the outcome, because like there's some people who are like, oh, I kicked them out and now they're better. So that was the good decision. And there's someone
Right.
who's like, I kicked them out and they didn't get better. Now I'm a horrible parent because of what happened.
Right. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so it's really tough, but I know you can't work with families or couples or talk about, the impact on others without the word enabling coming up. It just
Right.
it always comes up, especially like in our
Right.
profession with substance use.
Hmm.
Because you don't hear it as
You,
much with like mental health or like physical health.
right.
But
Right.
in our
Yeah. You're right.
area, it's prime.
Right. You brought up something good a while ago when you said Andrew, you said like maybe one parent's on board and one isn't. And like let's say you have a teenager or even an adult child who has a substance abuse problem. You always have one parent that wants to be tougher and one parent that wants to be softer. And that's totally normal. And the tougher parent always feels like, well, this other parent, they need to back me up. But what I always say is, no, you need to back up to where the softer one is. And the reason I say this is because if 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 the thought is we're going to kick them out, right? And then they're going to decide to get better. Let's say you kick them out and then something terrible happens. That's going to destroy you. So I'm not saying you shouldn't kick them out. I'm saying you should have to both be on you have to both be in agreement about that. And if you're not both in agreement about that, you back up to the one that's maybe not ready for that. And eventually, if need be, that other person will get there. And then you make that choice together and you say, no matter what, we decided this together. I would say, I'd rather you make a united decision and be wrong than a split decision because that won't work. And the last thing I'll say about this is if you're trying to figure out, am I helping or enabling? I have a formula for that. Anytime you're helping someone, you have a good feeling about it. You feel good about helping people. It's the way humans are wired. If you're doing something for someone and you feel resentful about it and you feel angry about it, it means you're doing it because you feel like you don't have a choice. And that's the indicator that you're enabling. So it's really like, how do you feel about what you're doing? Is
Yeah,
that's your guidepost.
yeah. That's a good uh check-in meter with yourself
Mm-hmm.
on that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could sit and talk about all these topics of your episodes because they're pretty fascinating and wide ranging. But the ones that we did, I'm glad because they're the ones that really come up a lot with families. The YouTube channel though is not the only thing you do, so I do want to
Right.
give you a chance to kind of talk about the work that you do as well besides the YouTube channel.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do have a practice. I don't do counseling anymore. I mostly do a lot of like consulting for family members, and then I do some short-term coaching for people. Um, Usually the ones I coach are what I would call like high functioning people who have addictions to try to help them stop before having to go to treatment or losing everything. But we have a process that we teach called the invisible intervention. It's called that because it's not like the one you see on TV. It's like behind the scenes, and the person never even knows it happened. It's like, how do I lead a person to get to the point where they want to change? How do I find their motivators so that when they do decide to get help, they're ready for it? And so we teach people how to do that. And also, one of the newest thing that I have, which I'm kind of excited about, is I have an AI version of myself. So like people know what Chat GPT is. It's like the Chat GPT version of me. It's trained because I have all that content and writings out there. So you can actually interact with this AI who will advise you like I do, only she's actually way smarter than me because she remembers everything. And I'm pretty ADD. I talk to her all the time. I'm like, dang, that is what I think, only better. She says it better. So that's available for people, which is really cool because you can access it 24/7. Crises don't really happen on an appointment schedule.
Right.
Crises happen in the middle of the night. I don't know what to do. And she's excellent for helping you think about, how do I word something? How do I approach this sensitive topic? She'll help you craft a text message. She'll help you decide a boundary and how to word it. Um, I know people feel really kind of mixed about AI, but it's actually it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn neat. Yeah.
Nice. That's great.
Mhm.
We'll have
Mhm.
links to where they can learn more about you. Check out the YouTube channel, which Put the Shovel Down's amazing title for it. So, final takeaways or things you would want our listeners to know as we wrap up.
I just want people to know you're not powerless. Whatever side you're on of this, you are not powerless. There's a million things you can do. You don't have to wait till everything's ruined.
That's great. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and talking. And we'll have listeners check out the YouTube channel and learn more about what you're doing. But it was a real pleasure to talk to you about all these topics that relate to families and loved ones. And they know now that there's just another really great resource out there with all this knowledge and information in a very interactive and visual and way with the channel. So thank you, Amber, for coming on and talking to us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for all the great work you're doing as well.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's Andrew J. SCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.